Hey everyone, it's Frederick Kramer here, and in today's video I'm going to cover how following emotions is actually completely overpowered in business when you want to scale an agency and build that. How it's actually going to help you book more appointments, close more deals, make ultimately more money, build systems that sustainably book you more calls, etc., hire team members, stuff like that. How it's extremely overpowered, and what you need to understand first of all is that emotions, sometimes you need to follow them, basically meaning you should need to do what you want with that emotions, and sometimes you need to do exactly the opposite. And in this video I'm going to cover two mechanisms that lead to the one and to the other, and how to understand when an emotion is coming up, whether it's the one mechanism or the other, what you should actually be doing then when you realize that something is going on, and then why it is actually practically overpowered, and why, how it actually is working when that happens, meaning not just a theory, but actually in practice, if that makes sense. It's really weird to articulate that right now, but I hope you get what I mean. And without further ado, let's get right into that. So what you need to understand is there are two mechanisms. Like I said, there's your goal-striving mechanism and resistance. And resistance is usually the one that people talk about a lot more. Basically the standard theme of don't follow your emotions, just be disciplined, stuff like that. That's basically just covering resistance. But then there's also your goal-striving mechanism, and when your goal-striving mechanism is giving you certain emotions, then you should actually be following them. And how you could imagine this is when you want to become successful, you're essentially becoming a different person, because what defines you as a person is your character traits, your skills, etc., stuff like that. And you need to change your character traits to some degree, probably, and you also need to learn more skills. And I think there was something else, but to be honest, I forgot again. And it's mostly about your actual character traits. Meaning, for example, someone might get started with running an agency and they're bad at sales, or they label themselves as being bad at sales because they simply don't convert. And what you need to do is you need to become a different person in regards to actually becoming better at sales. And there are some character traits that don't actually get you forward when you are having sales. For example, when you're quite introverted, then you need to become more extroverted, and that when you're becoming more extroverted, to some degree you're becoming a different person. That's one example. There are tons of other examples with discipline and actually doing work, stuff like that. And what you need to understand is every time you change yourself, the old version of yourself, the introverted person, is going to find it painful when you do things that an extroverted person will do. So when I'm very introverted but I'm going on a sales call, of course it's painful. And the reason why it's painful is because the introverted self is slowly dying when you're doing that, and you're becoming more extroverted by being on those calls more. And that's basically a form of resistance manifesting itself. So to sum it up, resistance is just the old you that's trying to keep holding you where it is right now, where you are right now, that doesn't want to be removed or be replaced by the new version of you that you actually need to become in order to have the skills, characteristics, etc. that make you successful and able to make more money, right? And for example, another form of resistance could be you're used to doing super stimulating things, like you're used to playing computer games all day long, watching short form content, social media, pornography, stuff like that. You're just used to doing these things, and when you stop doing that, it's painful because it's boring. That's also a version of you being addicted to such things, requiring lots of stimulation, dying because you're not doing it anymore. And when you do this for a long time, the pain is actually going away. And that's also why people always say business is the hardest at the beginning, because at some point the transformation is simply finished and you now are that person, and the things that you need to be doing aren't painful anymore. So for example, I can remember 2-3 years ago when I started sending outreach for the first time, I had so many limiting beliefs. I thought no, this is not going to work, these people don't like me, and I found it really painful to reach out to them, and also had struggles when people reply to me and being aggressive, or how you can say their ego being triggered, starting arguments and stuff like that. I really found that painful, and I had resistance towards doing outreach. But now I don't even have that to sales, because when someone's seriously getting emotional, I can just keep frame and understand that it's just them and their situation. They don't really know me, who I am, and stuff like that. But that is a transformation. And now, for example, outreach for me isn't painful at all anymore. For some people, it still is at the beginning. And when you're done with that transformation, what I want to say is the pain is going to go away, because there's no resistance anymore towards doing that because you are already the person at that point. So that's basically resistance. And the other form is the goal-striving mechanism. And what that basically is the reason why you actually started your business. Like, there's, like, not everybody is starting a business. Like, you average people, they don't do that because running a business is quite painful. So you need to have a very specific and very deep reason to actually doing that, why you want to make so much money, why you want to have that freedom, that time freedom, that location freedom, not having a boss. That, like, average people are fine having a boss, having a 9 to 5, or maybe they don't like that, but they don't dislike it enough to decide starting a business. And your goal-striving mechanism is basically the good version of you that wants to change, that wants to become successful, that made you click on this video because it's like the name says, it's striving for a goal. So you want to get there. And the goal-striving mechanism is also giving you emotions sometimes. So for example, when you're spending time with old friends, let's say you're doing that, and you realize that the activity that you're doing, whatever you're doing, maybe you're going to the cinema or watching a random movie, that this is actually quite of a waste of time. And I'm not saying that it's always the case that you're wasting time when you're spending time with friends or something. A lot of the time it actually is, especially when your friends are not on the same level or further than you. But I'm not going to get distracted too much by that topic now. It's basically just, you will realize at some points that you've done something wrong and that skipping outreach or skipping sales calls is not good. And basically what's going on in your mind is that you have, like, your goal-striving mechanism that wants to change, that wants to get further, and you have the resistance, which is simply just the old version of yourself that's unconsciously trying to survive. And the only thing that you need to do is that whenever you get an emotion from the goal-striving mechanism, is that you need to follow this and just do what it basically wants you to do. So you want to follow your emotions when you realize they come from your goal-striving mechanism. And when you realize that your emotions come from resistance, then you want to do exactly the opposite. So you want to do what's exactly painful. And probably doing what's painful is even more powerful than just doing what your goal-striving mechanism wants you to do. But these emotions are a very, very direct indicator to what's making the most progress. Because usually progress is denoted by how much you're changing yourself or how much you're changing something. And everything in your business is just a reflection of yourself. So when you're making a lot of progress, you're changing a lot, meaning a lot of your old self is dying, meaning it's very painful. So a lot of time actually making a lot of progress is quite painful to do. And basically by that, like by realizing, okay, what is the most painful related to your resistance, not like cutting your arm off or something, of course, like in terms of the resistance emotions, what's the most painful is usually what's going to make you the most progress. And when you realize that you have specific resistance to something, then, and it's literally that type of resistance and not just because it doesn't make sense, then you know that you should be following that. And now the question becomes, okay, when do I know that something is resistance? When do I know that something is just my goal-striving mechanism? And I will try to give as many or as sufficient examples as possible here to really drive that point home, because that's a bit more tricky to figure out, but like the foundation is done now. You know, like, okay, this is goal-striving mechanism, this is resistance, and resistance is more common than the goal-striving mechanism. And for example, like this, to give you a practical example of resistance, today it's Sunday, and a few weeks ago I used to not work on Sundays at all because I wanted to like keep up my health and stuff like that, and like keep it consistent and not burning out, stuff like that. But then, for example, I realized with the metrics from my Oura Ring that on weekends I was actually recovering less than on average days, and that nothing is really stopping me from just keeping on working there. And of course, I'm just testing it right now, etc., etc. Could not work, whatever. But this day, like tomorrow, I got up and I'm not used to working on Sundays, so I had resistance towards going to work. And in this case, it's very obvious, like, this is not my goal-striving mechanism, this is just me being sort of lazy because my old self is not used to working on Sundays and is used to taking longer breaks on the weekends and not working there. And in this case, what I've done is I just tracked my metrics, my Oura Ring metrics from today, and they were really good actually, like way better than like 97 sleep score, stuff like that, in case you know, and also like 95 readiness, so really, really good. and everything else was also in KPI, if you want to call it like that. And then I know, okay, like this is literally just emotional resistance. I can completely ignore that. It's like, it doesn't matter at all. Another thing that's like obviously going to be resistance is when you're like doing a sales call and you have like resistance and it's like uncomfortable talking to the person, even just like seeing them join the meeting. Maybe when one of the highest leverage activities in your business is doing cold calls, you're going to feel a lot of resistance when you're hearing that Skype sound of like waiting for the prospect to reply, or like take their phone up to talk to you. I don't know what you call that, but yeah, but basically these things, like these are obvious cases of resistance. And whenever there's an emotion, a negative emotion related to something that's conducive to your goal, it's 95% of the time it's resistance. But then the goal driving mechanism can also be an emotion to follow, which is basically, like in my case, it's usually this, like thinking, this is low leverage, this is not going to get me further, and I should spend my time on other things. And in this case, you should actually follow your emotions because it's literally just your goal driving mechanism, and it actually does make sense. And whenever you have an emotion that's saying something like, you're wasting your time here, that doesn't make that much sense, then you should like look a bit closer to see if there could be any form of resistance. But it is most likely actually your goal driving mechanism. So if I try to like find an example here. So for example, right now, sales is not the main bottleneck. It's not like my top of funnel bottleneck in business right now. It's going to be at some point, but right now it's still actually like having the KPIs and stuff like that on the systems before that. And whenever I like spend a lot of time on training sales, it feels a bit wrong. But not because I have problems actually like working on sales, which of course there's some resistance naturally, but the resistance is more, it's actually a resistance in terms of the goal driving mechanism, because I realize like this is not the main thing to work on right now. And working on sales would make much more sense if I just had like full capacity calls every day, enough volume to practice and everything like that. And there are a lot of examples where actually doing something doesn't make sense. Or for example, when you're watching a video, could even be this video, and you see something where you disagree with that and you're thinking like, that's stupid, that's not necessarily a limiting belief. Like sometimes your emotions are actually right, and that's literally just by following your goal driving mechanism. And I hope you now see the difference between these two and when to do what and like what appears when, if that makes sense. And it's really powerful. Because, and how this is going to help you book more appointments and stuff like that, is when you have resistance towards doing a certain activity that's actually conducive towards you like making progress, which could be sending outreach, going on sales calls, doing cold calls, stuff like that. When you have a negative emotion, resistance in this case, then you know, okay, I'm just not going to do that. And you can be fine because it's literally just the pain. You know, it's just the pain, and this pain means exactly that you're growing. So there's no reason that you need to listen to that emotion, and you can just completely ignore that, and that's actually going to make it less painful or less, it's going to reduce the uncertainty of what you need to do. And it's going to, like, at least in my case, from my experience, it makes it a lot easier to do it, even though the pain, of course, is still there. And on the other hand, you can understand, like, when something is important, and then you know, okay, like, this is actually low leverage, I should not be spending my time on that, I should be spending my time on other things that actually, like, drive me forward. And this, again, is like a positive imagine to follow that. And when you do more outreach because you're going through more pain, and you do, like, doing more sales calls because you're going through more pain, and you're improving your scripts because that's actually more painful right now than, like, sending outreach, then you're going to ultimately book more calls, obviously, and do that faster. For example, another form of resistance can also form in positive ways. So shiny object syndrome, for example, when you think, I should be hiring team members right now, even though you're not able to actually do the process yourself, hence I'm like me not having sales reps right now, because I'm not confident that like another person could do the process in KPI and stuff like that at this point. Like if you're having such things, then it wouldn't make sense to hire new people or to try out new stuff. And that's just resistance because it's trying to distract you from the main thing. And this is not actually high leverage. if you genuinely believe that it is higher leverage, and there's no way you could see a way that this is actually wasting time, then it's your growth driving mechanism. And just because it's your growth driving mechanism, it doesn't mean that you're right, but you should at least be following that. Because when you genuinely believe something is going to help you, whether it's actually true or not, you should be following that first of all, because at some point you're going to see the truth, and then you're going to see whether it actually does work or not. And I could talk a lot more on these things, but I think they're pretty clear now. So as an action item, what I want you to do is I want you to become aware when emotions manifest, whether they belong to your growth driving mechanism, basically the good you, or whether they belong to actually resistance, meaning the old you or the bad you, if you want to call it like that doesn't want you to make progress. And when you become better and more aware of what is what, it's going to be very easy to follow them, and it's going to save you a lot of time, like a shitload of time, because you know exactly if you're doing the right thing or not, just because of your emotions. And this is literally like more overpowered than like don't listen to your emotions, just do this, because sometimes you actually genuinely think, okay, this is stupid, I should not be doing that, and it's actually right. And that's basically it for this video. I don't see anything more that I should be talking about. If you want us to run your outbound systems done for you and book you a lot of calls because you have high leverage things to do, then feel free to check out the link in the description. We could help you with that. It's absolutely no pressure. You don't need to do that. You're probably not even fit for that because you're just starting out or something like that. No pressure. It's just one thing in case you want to get me back the benefit that you just got. And other than that, I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Have a great one. Apply what I just said, and goodbye.